You're listening to Advice from Your Advocates, a show where we provide elder law advice to professionals who work with the elderly and their families.
Welcome back to Advice from Your Advocates podcast. I'm Bob Manner. I'm a certified elder law attorney in Michigan. I'm really excited about our guest today, Craig Goldenfarb, who's an attorney in Florida and a friend of mine. And one of the things I wanted to talk to Craig about was we all were very engaged in the story about the football player, Damar Hamlin, that had that terrible situation on the football field. Many of us watched the video. I happened to be watching it live. And where he went in, I believe, and Craig will kind of correct us if I'm wrong, cardiac arrest, and they had the proper emergency folks there that could help him. And it looks like, you know, he lived. He hopefully makes a very good recovery. And the reason I wanted to talk to Craig about that is because Craig actually started his own charity that deals with this. So Craig Goldenfarb from Gold Law in Florida, tell us a little bit about your charity.
Sure. Good morning, Bob. I'm Craig in Florida, and I'm an attorney, a personal injury attorney. And I had a couple things lead up to starting this charity in my life that all came together, kind of inspiring me to start a charity in 2016. So I was a younger personal injury attorney, and I got given a case where an 11-year-old boy died at school. And he died on the flag football field. So people just thought he passed out or, was dehydrated. And they had a defibrillator at the school and they didn't bring it to the scene. And because they didn't bring it to the scene, this poor young boy died. I started handling 1 or 2 or 3 cases like that involving the issue of a defibrillator. And then in the meantime, I've been a soccer player all my life. And in my 30s, I witnessed 2 soccer players, adults, die in front of me. Of sudden cardiac arrest on a soccer field. And so all these things came to fruition about the same time. So about 5-10 years ago, I decided that, hey, something could be done about people dying. And when I started looking at it, it had a lot to do with defibrillators and how effective they were. So I started a charity called Heart of the Game. And Heart of the Game gives away free defibrillators to youth sports clubs, like softball, baseball, soccer, and gives away free training for a year on CPR and how to use the AEDs. So we've given away over 40 of these defibrillators already in Florida. We mostly focus in Florida, but that's the charity Heart of the Game.
Wow, that's great, Craig. And I'm going to tell you about, we actually had a local story right here in my local town. They call it, they have a charity that's come about off of it too, called London Strong. And it's almost the exact same story you're saying about the football. This was a gymnastics player. She was actually at a large water park, I think, and they had the defibrillator, but weren't properly trained on it. And it's just a terrible story. This young girl, in very good health, very popular young girl, and kind of the same story. So these are the situations that come up. And so talk about that. When you have a situation, how did this come about? What's your origin story of how this came about, and how these cases, what type of cases is this, and what does it look like, and like what geographic area do you cover?
Sure. Well, as far as my practice, we cover defibrillator cases across the entire United States. And one of the reasons is because I created this niche area of law, and then I'm a member of American Association for Justice, and we formed a little committee, a subcommittee on this area of law. So my firm's probably done more of it than most firms in the United States because we niched it. And the facts are that 350,000 to 400,000 people a year will have a sudden cardiac arrest, which some people call heart attack. And that's when your heart stops beating. That's called sudden cardiac arrest. And of those, up to 10,000 per year are kids. And the kids, it usually happens because they have some congenital heart defect that nobody knows about, because kids don't get EKGs, echocardiograms, electrocardiograms regularly as part of a checkup. So 10,000 kids die a year, and most of those are while doing sports. So my goal with this charity was to have an AED available for kids and adults that are watching their kids. And, sometimes as soccer dads and soccer moms, we get our heart elevated too.
Yeah.
So my goal was to place these, in the snack shack or wherever on the golf cart. A lot of sports clubs have golf carts that drive around. So they can put them wherever they want, and we actually help them design their implementation plan when we give away a free defibrillator. So that's the goal, is to prevent these deaths from occurring with timely emergency treatment.
When it comes to lawyers, I think sometimes it's interesting. People have different opinions on lawyers, but one of the things, I had a professor in undergrad actually who was a lawyer, and he talked about how we can use the law and use the court system to actually improve society. And I think that's one of the things that you're kind of talking about here, to say these organizations, large organizations, universities, schools need to know that they need to be trained in this, not just have the equipment, which I have one of them here, but not just have the equipment, but know how to use it. And I think that's kind of the point of having the court system. Some of the cases that you take is to say, okay, you need to, this needs to get fixed. We need to have better awareness and better training on the use of these things, because imagine with Damar Hamlin, if they had the staff there, they had the equipment, but nobody knew how to use it properly, it would have been even much greater tragedy.
Yeah, liability is one of the major blocks for entities having these devices, because the first objection is we're going to get sued, nobody's going to know how to use it, the battery's going to go dead, etc. So as part of my duty as a business owner, I believe it's my responsibility to have an AED. That's my feeling. And if that comes with battery charging and once a year maintenance, which it does with the companies I buy from, most of the companies that sell you them, they sell you a service package. And the analogy I can use is just like your fire extinguisher. We all have to have a fire extinguisher by code. We have to have it serviced X times per year by code. I would like to see across the country defibrillators required in businesses, just like fire extinguishers are. That's my goal. And the training is not hard. We redo it every 6 months because we have new employees. The companies that sell you these defibrillators, they have programs that you can purchase of safety, maintenance, and training that are not expensive. Right. I have three of them in my office at various levels of my office space. So I lecture a lot about liability issues, trying to convince business owners, hey, you might get sued if you don't have one at all.
Right.
And if you do have one, you might save a life. And I'm more worried about saving lives than litigation. Right. And yes, there's litigation that comes out of this, but there's litigation that comes out of every dangerous thing in your office or your business. So if you have a fire extinguisher, you should have a defibrillator.
Well, and as a business owner, there's so many things to think about, and I can understand that a small business owner, and honestly, we didn't have one of these until I heard you start talking about it. And when you started talking about it, it's like, why don't we have one of these? And then we got one, and we said, okay. Everybody started looking at it and being very scared of it. Well, of course, it came with training, and of course, we do the continuing training. And honestly, it was a very good team building exercise too. It wasn't just okay, we need to all get trained and go through this chore of getting trained on it. It was a very positive experience to get everybody trained. And I think everybody kind of feels a little bit better about it, because I do work with an older population. And the idea that we didn't have one is, kind of shocking, but a lot of us never think about these things. So the work that you're doing is really great from the standpoint of awareness and why it's so important, and making sure that we really, not just have them, but there's training on it. So I'm just really impressed with all that you're doing on this. Tell us a little bit more about it. Where else should these things be? I mean, I know you said in every business, like obviously on the sports fields. Do you think they are in most youth sports?
Well, what most lawyers and most people don't know is that every single state in the United States actually has, as part of their Good Samaritan Act, a section on defibrillators. And nobody's ever read it or seen it, because you have to find the Good Samaritan Act. And then you have to go to whatever subsection deals with defibrillators. So there are websites, if you just Google it, state laws on defibrillators, and you can find out what the law is in your state. And I know Michigan is a state that requires them in certain locations. So it has to go state by state. I'm a little surprised at Florida, because they don't require them in gyms in Florida. Florida has the oldest population in the country, and everybody exercises everywhere. So they're required in gyms in about 10 or 15 states right now. My opinion is they should be required in gyms in every state. There is federal legislation that says they do have to be in airports. That's why you see them in every airport. Right. They have to be on airplanes since 1983, in every federal building. And that was the Cardiac Survival Act of 2000 that was passed, I believe, whoever was president back then, maybe Clinton, I don't remember. So that's been there for about 20 years. So there's federal level legislation, and then every state has their legislation within the Good Samaritan Act I didn't know any of this until I handled my first case, and I had to learn this stuff. So my opinion is the more progressive the state is in mandating these, the better. The problem is that a lot of Chamber of Commerce's and state organizations and Congress don't like mandates on businesses. And I feel that that's a shame, because sometimes you need to mandate safety, and this is a safety issue.
Like you said about the fire extinguisher, I mean, they certainly would mandate a fire extinguisher. And I don't know what the statistics are, but I would suspect that, the heart attacks are going to be as big of a risk from a standpoint of what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis, or cardiac arrest. If that's
absolutely. I mean, fires, how many people are killed by fire every year? Probably not a bunch, but 350 to 400,000 people die a year of sudden cardiac arrest. It's probably a lot more than are killed by fires, yet we all have to have fire extinguishers. Absolutely. So it doesn't make any sense that they're not required in many places. No, a lot of business owners, and in fact, when I started handling these cases, I said, why didn't you have one? And most business owners say I couldn't afford it, or I thought about it, or I never thought about it. But actually, they're quite affordable now. They're about $1,200. And that's not a lot for many businesses. It is a lot for some gym owners, but it's part of doing a gym business, in my opinion. That's where people's hearts are elevated. Most of the national chains like LA Fitness and others, they do have them, even though they don't have to, because they realize it's the standard of care. Right. So the standard of care, in my opinion, needs to keep going up and up and up. Most golf courses now have them somewhere in the drive shack or wherever. Most sporting venues, I've had cases against about 5 different stadiums, University of Central Florida and others, where there was a failure and someone passed away due to a heart attack at a stadium. So now all stadiums have them, but they're not mandated in most places, even though the cost has come way down from about $4,000 to about $1,200.
It seems to me that it's a cost of doing business, but I want you to talk a little bit about the use of them. And what I mean by that is, I'll admit to you, I was a bit intimidated when you start talking about it, and I thought, oh, now we have to get trained on using this. I'm worried about it. I was worried about cost, and then you made it clear that was not going to be cost prohibitive. But then I was thinking, oh, I have to learn how to use this. And so I understand that there's kind of 2 types of the defibrillators, one that the medical staff use, and then one for us average folks that is actually really pretty easy to use. So can you kind of describe the 2 types for us?
Sure. The types that I don't know how old everybody is who's listening, but there was an old TV show, I think it was Emergency One or something, where it's like you say clear and you put the paddles and you shock the person. That's similar to what they still have. It's rather complicated. It takes some skill to learn it, but that's the EMS, the emergency rescue people are trained on that. The one next to you is an automated external defibrillator that's portable, and it's kind of like, we'll call it the consumer model. And there's lots of studies that have come out in the last 10 years that shows you have to be have the intellect of a 9-year-old to be able to figure it out with the prompts that are on the box and the prompts that are on the device itself. So I'll take you through it. So the first blockade is fear, because everybody's freaking out because someone is on the floor. So you've got to actually mentally take yourself to that place. Someone just had sudden cardiac arrest and they're on the floor. Everybody's running around. Somebody's calling 911, and everybody says, "Where's the AED? I think we know where it is." So someone knows where it is, and then someone has to go get it. So these are all fear points. Who's going to go get it? All right. Then the person who gets it says, "I'm not touching this person. I'm going to kill him." So everybody's panicking, and someone has to be calm and say, "I'm taking this on," and open the box and unzip the thing. I mean, all of these are fear points. So this whole thing, if you show it, Bob, these are all fear points: opening the door, taking it out, looking at it. And then you look at the thing and you see that's a Zoll model, which is a good model, and you have to unzip it. And these are all points of fear. And meanwhile, your friend is sitting there on the floor dying.
Right.
So who's going to do it? And if it's a female, it does involve taking off their shirt. Oh my gosh, we're going to take off the shirt of a female. With a guy, it's usually less of a problem, but there's a pair of scissors in there in the kit. So who's going to use the scissors to cut the guy's shirt? Or who's going to rip the guy's shirt off? He's going to die. So these are all fear points. So you take the thing out, and then it's got pictures on it. Most of these have pictures of 2 pads and where they go on the body. So you got to open the thing. I mean, each one of these things is scary, and then you drop it, like you just did, right? And you're so nervous at that point because the adrenaline is flowing, you definitely are going to drop it. And then you get the thing out and there's a picture on it of where it goes. And so you've got to place the pads. And then you're scared who's going to deliver the shock. Well, the good thing these days is that you don't make the decision as to the shock being delivered. The pads that get placed on the body analyze the heart rhythm, and the machine says, most of these say out loud in a voice that you can hear, take your hands off if you're doing CPR, stop CPR, take your hands off, and we are analyzing the rhythm. It says it out loud. And then after it analyzes the rhythm, the machine makes the decision whether to administer a shock. And then it'll say out loud, you may resume CPR. And it's still monitoring the thing. And then if it determines another shock is needed, it says, stop CPR, analyzing rhythm, take your hands off the victim. And then it will deliver a second one if needed. While all of that is scary, it's easy.
Yeah.
According to the New England Journal of Medicine article, you have to be 9 years old, have the intellect of a 9-year-old to follow the prompts. So I hope we all have the intellect of a 9-year-old.
Well, and that was it. I was shocked at how easy it was. I assumed that there was going to be some decision making, and there really isn't. It's just follow the instructions. I had a coach many years ago that would say, just go dumb. You're overthinking this. Just go dumb. Do the thing that it says. Just do what you're told. And often that's good advice for life, is just do what you're told. And it doesn't require a lot of thinking.
I mean, if you look at the thing off your right shoulder, Bob, the laminated thing, that's, if you hold that up, you see that's some instructions probably, or some maintenance instructions. I mean, it's that simple. It's basically telling you what to do. And if those aren't the instructions, then they're on the device itself.
It literally has three things. One, turn the AED on. Number two, place the pads, and it shows you exactly where to place the pads. Number three, press the shock button. And then when you press the shock button, then it gives you verbal instructions from there. And it's just mostly it's to, step away. And so it is much easier than I would have ever imagined it to be, which is a very important point, because like you say, fear, we got to move past that. I think that there's just, unfortunately, it might be sort of that cultural expectation of the TV shows that we watched, and, everybody, jumping away and the body jumping, and none of that happens when you use one of these machines. And there's just sort of a cultural expectation based on the movies and TV shows that we've watched.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple. The combination of CPR plus a defibrillator leads to a 90% survival rate.
Wow.
90% survival rate if done within the first 3 to 5 minutes after they drop. So let me say that again. If done within the first 3 to 5 minutes after the person hits the floor, if you use CPR and an AED, you're going to have a 90% survival rate. For every minute that goes on beyond 5 minutes, the survival rate decreases by 20%. And what's interesting is the national response time for ambulances, nationally, if you average it, is 7 to 9 minutes.
Oh, wow.
That's too late.
Right.
So if you think that the ambulance is going to come between 7 and 9 minutes, the person might be already dead. So the responsibility in my head is those first magical 5 minutes. And the only people there for the first magical 5 minutes are us.
Yeah, very important. Talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned about maintenance and the battery and all of that. Is there an expiration? How often do these things have to be replaced? How often do they need to be serviced? I know you've spoken a little bit about it, but give us a little more detail.
It's pretty easy for me, is that I pay someone to do it. I pay the company to do it, and they make money off this, just like the fire extinguisher guys who come and check your fire extinguisher. You probably have a laminated little thing on your fire extinguisher, right? And it says the last time it was checked, if you've ever looked at that little laminated thing, and it says who checked it, from what company, and when. You get the same thing for your defibrillator, a little laminated card, and the company that you hire, it's the same company that you bought it from, will come twice a year and check the battery, replace the battery if necessary, and they check the pads, and then you're good to go. So all I do is I look at that card and make sure that, my office administrator is making sure they're coming twice a year, because I don't want it to die.
Right.
So that's it. It's that simple. It's whoever you buy it from, they're going to offer you a service plan. And my service plan is like $100 a year, literally $100 a year. And if they need batteries, they'll replace the battery, but that's like every 3 years.
Yeah.
So the ongoing cost of this to possibly save someone's life is $100 a year. That's a joke.
And, these are standard things that businesses always have to deal with. I mean, we had the fire, the fire administrator, I can't remember the title, but the fire chief come by, or one of his employees to check our fire extinguishers. That was part of the living in the town that we live in, that it was required. And we know that, and we know that we have to have those fire extinguishers serviced. And it's just, it's just a part of every business operation is they're going to have some things that they've got to make sure require maintenance. Your copy or your computers, everything requires some form of maintenance. This is just like anything else
Well, what's funny is, since I speak so much on the liability and helping people understand why this is something they should have, one of the cute things I think I say is, who's the person most likely to drop of a cardiac arrest in your office, sir?
Me.
And everybody points at themselves. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so if you're not doing this for your clients or customers, and you're not doing it for your coworkers, do it for yourself, because who's the most stressed out person in your company? You. So if you want to save your own life, which is the most likely life to be saved, do this for yourself.
Yeah.
And then when I say that to a lawyer, he's like, yeah, I'm the guy who's going to have the heart attack. Maybe I should buy this thing. So I think that usually lands pretty well on business owners.
So I know you've talked about this, but I just want to dig into it a little bit further, because you hit the right on the head about the fear, and just the biggest fear I think people are going to have is, I'm going to use it wrong. Am I going to be sued because I used it wrong? And I think you already answered it, that it's not really possible to use it wrong as long as you follow the instructions, which a 9-year-old can do. But talk about that kind of liability.
Sure. So the statutes, the laws under your Good Samaritan Act, they all have one paragraph dealing with defibrillators, and they're all really protective of what is called a Good Samaritan. So if you attempt to use the AED and the person still dies, first of all, they were going to die anyway. So in personal injury law, we call that a lack of causation, which is that they're going to die if you don't touch them. And if you touch them and they did die, there's no causation. In other words, what you did not cause them to die. They were going to die anyway. So you didn't cause them to die by screwing up. And even if the machine screws up, like has a technical difficulty, that's a product liability case. And I've had those too. So it's the machine that screws up, not you.
Right.
So there's every Good Samaritan Act in the United States has a provision protecting the lay user, in other words, a non-expert, non-doctor user, from liability. I can get around that if the battery was dead, get around it, meaning I can have a successful lawsuit. If the battery was dead, or you didn't maintain it, or maybe if you didn't have one at all. I have never in 30 years had a case against an individual for their screwing up the usage during sudden cardiac arrest. And I've done dozens of these cases. So it's really protected for the user. The business, on the other hand, that's who sometimes I have to target because they screwed up in the implementation, or they locked it up in the closet, or the one guy who knew how to use it was off that day, or nobody knew where it was. These are common fact scenarios. So those are easy to prevent, to be candid, all these fact scenarios, but they happen all the time. And sadly, that keeps me in business for that area of law. I'd rather that area of law go away from me, which is that lives are saved.
Well, and that's the thing, is that this is not one of those things where you train one person who might be on vacation. This is very easy to train my whole staff. We had everybody there. We brought in some donuts, which weren't very heart healthy, and we actually had a very enjoyable time with it. I think we had a potluck afterwards, if I remember right. And to do that every 6 months or so, that guarantees that somebody there is going to be comfortable with the process and using it. And it's just good. It's good business. It's good employee morale to know that we're concerned about this, and that we're making sure that we're protecting each other and protecting our clients that come in and everything else. So I'm really glad you turned me on to all of this, because it seems like this should be something that is in a code, or just like the fire code and things like that.
I really think mandates should occur in some situations, just like they mandate fire extinguishers and they mandate, whatever other things we got to deal with as business owners. I think it's a cost of doing business, and I think it's a valid cost of doing business, especially for certain industries. Now, office buildings, there are a few states that require them for every company in an office building that's 10,000 square feet or bigger. That's interesting. So it goes by the size of the building. Some of them have them just required in gyms. like New York has that. Every state requires them a certain level of schools. So in Florida, if you're a member of the Florida Athletic Association, which all public schools are a member of, you must have an AED and an AED plan, which means they have to have several AEDs. So there are companies that administer compliance with that in schools. So they are in all schools in the United States for the most part. Private schools are a different issue because they're not required in private schools. So my charity has given away a few to private schools because if your kid's in private school, you may want to ask because they should be in schools too, in private schools as well. And the next question that comes off is, how do I buy one of those things? Well, I mean, whenever I think, where do I find one? The word Amazon always pops into my head, right?
Absolutely.
These days, you can find anything on Amazon. You can if you want to get it with no training.
Right.
But my suggestion is you simply do a Google search, put in the name of your city, and put buy defibrillator Cleveland or buy defibrillator Michigan. And you will get, because all these companies do really good SEO work, you will get a company in your city that sells them and trains. It's that simple. Buy defibrillator name of city, and you will get a company, and they will sell the training. So it's that easy, and you should be paying anywhere between $1,200 to $1,300 maximum. And they give you a choice. The one that Bob bought there is in a glass case, and it often gets mounted on the wall. And then there's a sign that comes with it oftentimes that you've seen in the airports that says AED. So that lets people know where it is. There's also portable models, and we give the portable models to the sports clubs because they're usually carrying it around on that golf cart or the little car they have. Or if they don't, then if it's a small sports club, they'll put it in a snack shack. So there's portable models and there's stationary models, and you can pretty much order anything you want. The one you have, Bob, I have that a similar one, and we have it posted on the wall. It's hung up like a fire extinguisher. So where do you get it? Google. How much does it cost? About $1,200 to $1,300. And who do you get it from? Whatever company comes up on Google. They're all good in your city or your town. So those are a lot of the questions I get. How much does it cost? Who provides the training, etc. So I want to get rid of all those barriers, which is how much money, how does this work, where do I get it, who gets trained, and we do training twice a year because we get new employees or employees get fired or leave or come on board, and even that's part of the service package. We paid for the service package that includes twice a year training. So all the hows and whys are really easy answers to this whole thing. None of them are complicated, as your coach said a long time ago. Dumb it down or whatever. And it's true. This is really easy to accomplish.
Well, and you never know where things are going to lead. Our trainer that came in and did the training has referred us a few cases since then. So you never know where.
Paid for itself. Absolutely. Well, the guy I use for our training is the guy who's partnered with my charity to provide the defibrillators at cost. So he gets them and sells them to our charity at cost and makes no profit, which is absolutely wonderful. So we can get them for about $900 because that's at cost, which is fantastic. So, raising awareness is great. And you may find that there's a charity in your state. There's charities like this in every state. And the sort of sad thing is most of these charities like mine are begun because someone lost their child.
Right.
And when you lose your child and you're looking for some way to let their legacy go on, if you lose your child to sudden cardiac arrest, you may start a foundation or a charity to raise money to save other children from losing their lives. So most of the charities I've seen across the United States are run by parents who have lost their child. And I'm a member of an organization called Parent Heart Watch. It's hundreds and hundreds of parents, even thousands across the nation, who have lost a child due to sudden cardiac arrest. I'm on their board, and it's a sad but great website, and it's hundreds of people who have lost their kids to sudden cardiac arrest. It was started by a woman in Orlando, Florida, who lost her son.
Wow.
That's the national organization that all the charities are kind of a member of, is Parent Heart Watch. And that's just such a special organization. And to go and hear those stories, you not only have people who've lost their kids, but you have survivors in that group. So a 14-year-old will get up and say, I'm here today because 2 years ago, I had a softball hit me in the chest, and they got to me within 2 minutes. And that's all I remember. I remember waking up at the hospital, and I'm now 14. I would have never made it to 14 unless there was an AED.
So that website is Parent Heart Watch.
ParentHeartWatch.com.
And then
And that's the
how-
survivors. And my charity
Yeah.
is Heart of the Game. So it's heartgame.org. Heartgame.org. And we have a couple golf tournaments a year. We have one in West Palm Beach, Florida, one in Orlando, Florida, where we raise funds. But if you're generous and you're feeling inspired, you can make a donation at heartgame.org. We take donations of any amount, and 100% of the proceeds go to funding defibrillators. We have no staff. We have no paid employees. We have me and our board, and we will send the defibrillator to your location. And we only handle Florida right now. But if you're looking for one to be donated to your kid's sports club, do a Google search, the same one, and you'll probably get that if you add the word charity to the Google search. You will find a charity in your state where you can get a free one for your sports club, just like mine. Every state has an organization like mine, and it's usually run by the parents of someone who lost their kid.
Well, that's really great, and the great work that you do, Craig. I appreciate everything you do. Thanks for coming on the podcast today. I know a lot of the folks that are listening are going to be listening on the audio version only, and I know we've had some references to so visual aids there. So if you're interested and want to see, you can find us on YouTube or on our website at manorlawgroup.com or YouTube, just search Manor Law. And thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate everything that you do. Craig's one of the most generous lawyers that I know. And thanks for everything.
You're welcome, Bob. It was an honor, and I'm glad to be able to spread the word and some awareness and save some lives.
Well, thanks for listening to Advice from Your Advocates. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, visit manorlawgroup.com.